We'll be doing the all day stuff now, but I've got to
Oh,
say.
yeah.
Thank you, councillors. Reconvening council, we're back on air, so to speak. Moving to item number 14, the administrative matters, July 2020, attachment 8, pages 102 through to 151. I'll first ask that somebody move to receive the report. Councillor Ash. Thank you. Councillor Lambert seconding. Those in favour?
No.
Carried. Thank you very much. What, in terms of process, what I've asked the Chief Executive is, as we go through his report, the relevant recommendations, we'll deal with them at the close of that section of the report. Does everybody understand that position? Thank you, and presumably you'll take questions on those sections as we go through it.
Section by section, yes.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, in section 1 regarding free waters, we've discussed that earlier in today's meeting. A reminder that we have all elected members have been invited to a workshop on the 4th of August in Palmerston North. So you should be aware of that, and you are free to, if not directly, but through a link to register your interest to attend that. Prior to that, on Monday, His Worship and I will be attending a Zoom call with Solgan, and particularly that call is for all chief executives and mayors to talk about the memorandum of understanding, which you've seen a copy of in my report, but also it will include a legal opinion prepared by Simpson Grierson on whether signing the MOU would trigger any consultation requirements. So that's a Zoom call for Andy and I on Monday, and August the 4th is the workshop that you've all been invited to attend.
Just a comment from me, I'm fairly sure that local government also will be asking that as a wider collective question across the sector in terms of legal position, and I think government's going to be well aware of that, and they may even legislate to be able to clarify that.
So if there are any questions on that, we can move to the commission.
So, sorry.
Yeah.
There is one recommendation there that delegates to the Audit and Risk Committee meeting tomorrow, but we won't have the legal opinion until Monday. So that will be challenging, I guess.
You're right. Yes, that's a good point. His Worship has a response.
So the Audit and Risk Committee, in passing the motion, could make that compliant on with legal clarification.
Okay.
Subject to
That being of a favourable outcome. Right. That's fine.
Councillor Wilson.
I'm actually happy to move it because it moved item 2 because it says that it be delegated to the Audit and Risk Committee tomorrow to discuss further. So I'm actually happy to move that item and number 2 as it stands.
Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Belsham, you wish to speak to the motion?
No, happy with that as said.
Any speakers? Councillor Ash.
I feel a little uncomfortable with this. I do feel it's something that should be a full council discussion and motion if it goes that direction. I have voiced before that I'd like to see a whole lot more information coming back through before we go committing to such thing. I'm obviously concerned about things such as privatisation and removing the voice of community as well from
So
process.
in terms of that, this would have to be signed by the 8th, isn't it? There's a timeline. There is a timeline around us.
Yeah, I've got 14th, so that
14.
yeah, that's soon in August.
So would you be asking that we, first of all, I don't think we're in the position to be able to fully discuss. I don't think we're in the position to fully discuss at this meeting. Are you asking for a separate meeting?
I'd be more than happy to attend a separate meeting to discuss it further. I think it's such a big issue that we need to understand it more in depth, and obviously information will come through from the meeting on the 4th of August to give us a greater understanding of it. But something as big as this, I think it's really important that council remains in that space. I don't feel comfortable with, from what I understand at this stage, for us to be entering into an MOU agreement where it may remove the voice of our communities and may remove our autonomy to make the decisions around our own water. And I'm obviously very concerned around privatisation of the water. I would like to attend that water forum prior to, for me anyway, making any decision around this.
Okay.
Is it more-
Two questions around this. So obviously you're speaking against the motion that is on the floor, which is obviously your right. But are you aware that the tranche that we're talking in regards to tranche 1, which is agreeing only to data collection and continuing a dialogue, are you aware that that's the requirements really only on tranche 1?
So that's our only obligation and only liability is
Correct. Does that alter your opinion?
maybe?
Looking for further speakers to the motion on the floor.
Yes,
Councillor Duncan.
I'd like to speak against the motion, Your
Certainly.
Worship, because given what Councillor Ash has just said also, I think that the clarification that we all need around this isn't something that most of us have got. That forum that the regional sector meeting that I just recently attended, there were so many different opinions, and there was a lot of clarification that I gained, but I think really I can't see that without that sort of background and further knowledge how any of us can make and fully understand that tranche 1 is around data collection, but it does start a process that we have been asked to go into, taking government money with absolute goodwill for the process to go forward. So, and that was from the minister. So they're requiring us to enter this process take the money, get the data together, deliver it to central government with the goodwill of going forward. So I think I really would like to see, I would really like to back up the fact that we need more discussion.
It's the goodwill of discussion.
Yes.
There's no legal requirement.
That's right.
Yeah. So we've had 2 speakers against the motion. Any other speakers? So just in terms of process, I'll just ask the Chief Executive, in terms of process, if the motion is voted against, voted down, there would need to, it would rest, the decision would rest with council, that there would be the opportunity to go to the workshop on the, what date is it? 4th of August. And then there would need to be a special meeting prior to the 14th. That's what you'd effectively be agreeing to. Is that correct?
What we're doing is just checking if the 14th is the correct date. We're just reviewing that now. But there'll be some time between
Before
the
council
yeah.
makes, okay, yeah, that's. I've just asked if there are any further speakers to the motion first. We've had 2 speakers against. Any further speakers to the motion? Councillor Gordon.
I've got a question, Your Worship. You referred to data collection, but on which page is that on? Because I'm scrolling through that document. Trying to find it. Just to
I
clarify.
can't give you a page number because I'm relying on the advice that was
Yes,
given at
yes.
rural and provincial. And I think even those speaking against have indicated that that's one of the prerequisite in effect. So as you see it,
Very much.
Councillor Belsham.
A statement in the MOU attached to this order paper. It does talk about working collaboratively in this first stage of the work, and one of the statements says this memorandum is intended to be non-binding insofar that it does not give rise to legally enforceable obligations between the parties. So really it's an intent to work together towards water reform. So I don't think it's at a level where we're going to be signing away our life. But this is the first step in this whole process. So personally, I think we should be moving forward and getting this in place.
I'll speak in favour of the motion. This is not legally binding us to proceed to any form of amalgamation or private sale or anything. But I think that we owe it to our community to be party to the discussions and look at the options that are available. I think we need to be at the table. One extreme is to say, regardless, we're going to buy into this. The other extreme is say, we actually don't like government's approach, therefore we're not going to engage. And I think that's equally potentially as bad. Unless there's another speaker, I'll go to right and reply.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for Councillor Gordon, the transfer was referred to is in the document there. And I actually agree with both Councillor Ash and Councillor Duncan here about the significant nature of what's being put in front of us as a going forward. But this simply is just an opportunity for us to be in the sandpit to have the conversation. And we really need to be in that sandpit. So all I'm suggesting is that the wording of the item number 2, and which I have moved and have a seconder for, is perfectly acceptable, and I encourage you to vote in favour of it so that we can actually move on and play in that sandpit.
And now must the vote. Those in favour? The ayes have it. Do you wish those speaking against? Do you wish your vote recorded?
No.
Okay, thank you. Carried. Back to you.
Thank you. Point 2 is on the district plan change. We've had a minute from the Commissioner on that to say that the hearing is now closed, and we anticipate a decision by the Commissioner by August 20th. We have approached the Commissioner to seek an interim decision, and we've not had a response to that yet. Item 3, Provincial Growth Fund is under consideration particularly for the Martin Rail Hub. I've had multiple contact points with the Provincial Development Unit on both the Martin Rail Hub and the 6 other PGF applications we submitted. There's nothing formal yet, but they acknowledge that particularly for the Martin Rail Hub, they would anticipate a decision being made by the 6th of August. Regarding point 4, local government term of president, you'll see there's a proposal in section 4 to reduce that from 3 consecutive terms to 2. I believe that should be a recommendation. Is that a recommendation there, Michael? Do we not give any viewership?
There was a remit, I think council, was it one of the remits council had already decided to support, or no, it was
No, this is from the National Council.
Yes, it was from National Council. To put aside any question that it's not being dealt with correctly, it probably would be better if it was a recommendation. So I will move that council supports the recommendation from the National Council that we endorse the fact that the national presidency be removed, would be reduced to a maximum of 2 terms rather than 3. 2 consecutive terms. It actually used to be 2 consecutive terms. And what happened here is that they had somebody absolutely outstanding. And they said, we don't want to lose them. So we'll break the rules. It's almost like a Trumpism or someone like that saying, hey, for the good of the nation or whatever, somebody needs to stay in power. Putin would be a better example.
Yeah, I was going to say yes.
Yes. But I think the point is valid, and that, I think we should support the National Council. So I'll also move that. Looking for a seconder, Councillor Dalgary. Any discussion? What is the vote? Those in favour? Those against? Carried.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Trump.
Point 5 on council, Mark, you'll see a recommendation there to push that out a year. The recommendation is actually wrong, it's been amended to 2021. That's really workload related.
Can I just speak to this one? So I approached the chief executive, but I think it had also been on the minds of the senior staff. I approached them with the view of the amount of work that we have to do this year. So we've got the 3 waters, which is an enormous body of work. We've got the long-term plan. We've got significant staff changes. There are all sorts of things that we do need to address within the space, but let's do it really well. And let's just give ourselves a bit of breathing space, because the workload is scary ahead of us. So I'm happy to move that. I'll get growlings from the Council Mark program, if that's okay. Looking for a seconder to that. Put to any discussion. Councillor Dalgety seconding.
Sorry, just a typo. Your worship, just because it changes the meaning, and so I point to it should be defer rather than deter.
Okay, yes, thank you. I think I've said it all really. So any other speakers to it? Councillor Dalgety.
I just think it is a something that I really like council to be part of going forward. So it is something we could say no to, but I think it's valuable having our independent people look at how we're doing things.
Incredibly valuable.
I fully support what you said, and to make it meaningful, I wish for us to give it 100%, and that's really the driver behind not doing it or recommending to delay, to defer.
Right, put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried.
Move to section 9 of my report regarding Poplar Grove. For an historic era, I would say, we've found that a house actually is partially built across a legal road, unbeknown to council, unbeknown to the homeowner. I think there's an opportunity for hysteria here, which absolutely is not needed. My recommendation there is that I would work with internally to ensure that the homeowner is unaffected effectively, and I seek your approval for that.
Councillor Dunn, would you like to move?
Yes.
Thought you might. Councillor Wilson is second. Do you wish to speak to it?
Oh, I'm pleased to hear it. They were very distraught when they heard, and no fault of their own. So it's lovely to hear this solution on the table.
I said hysteria, and I would like to take it back. I should have said anxiety.
Yeah.
It's a better word.
We've done everything right.
Yes, absolutely. And so if you're talking, so
So I think we'll move on. Put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried, thank you.
The next one is some sale of council land at Venable Close. Let's take it as read. Is an opportunity for us to help in a subdivision on land that we essentially don't use. I'll make a point that you'll see is that this is an application made by a member of staff, and I understand that she has declared a conflict of interest in it appropriately, correct? So I'm confident that this has all been done appropriately.
Any questions of the report?
Of point 10,
Yeah, of this point. The only question I'd raise is, does it contravene our policies around sale of council assets? Or is the threshold so low here that it makes very little difference? So would it be wise of us to note that?
yes, and recommendation due to the fact that it is below.
So the recommendation would note that this potentially could contravene the sale of surplus council property. However, council has considered that, and in this case, the threshold is so low. We accept that.
I want to shorten it a little. Can I? Yeah. And we'll come back to it.
Yeah. I'm sorry, this might sound like we're being pedantic, but it actually is important when we come to things like audit to actually have the answer in place. Councillor Gordon.
Your Worship, just to clarify, we're talking about this page 128, and there's a little highlighted coloured bit. So we're selling the bit between the footpath and where the fence appears to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
What's shaded in light green?
Yes. Yes.
Councillors, are you happy if we move ahead with a mover and seconder to do that, bearing in mind that there will be some words put in around what I'm suggesting?
I've just got a question.
Yes, take the question.
Clarification around stopping of road. Can you actually just explain the stopping of road? Because I don't know that everyone would fully understand what that actual statement means.
Mark, can you help me with that, please?
Well, the stopping of road means it's no longer used as a road. It's an actual passage for vehicles. In this case, it's no exit road.
So that was a paper road type.
It didn't go in.
That's just a strip of the road
Of a
section.
road, yes.
Right. Okay.
Strip of the road.
Yeah. So it's not an actual road
It's not as
section.
if there's a road.
It's not a road that was. Right. Thank you.
Come back to you, Councillor Wilson, you wish to move?
Happy to move with the inclusion of the reference to the sale of council property.
I'll second it.
Seconded. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, Your Worship, I think it's fairly clear.
Any further speakers too? Put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. We'll leave it to staff just to put some words on that.
Section 11, which is retention of the building line restriction on 360 Connery Road and Marple.
Yes. This came up through a resource consent. The building line is where, in fact, there's a limitation on how close to, it's basically where you can't build. If the building line is typically in the middle of the road, you can't build in the distance on. It's sometimes put in place for a projected road, and that's what the issue is here. In fact, it doesn't affect the resource consent, but nonetheless, given that it would impede the subdivision of number 74, the recommendation is that the building line stays. That means that there's the potential to access that site.
Just a question from me. I meant to go and check the property, but the question has been slightly historical, hasn't it? And there is an existing building that is effectively built closer to the boundary than would normally have been permitted under our district plan rules.
I couldn't comment on that, sorry, Your Worship, but I'm not aware of that issue. This was a garage, it's supposed to be extended. But it did not, when it was looked at more closely, it didn't come within the limit, except for
Councillor Gordon?
So through Your Worship, in a case like this, if it had been found that a building had been built within that building line exclusion, and someone bought a property at number 74 and then bought a movable house in on the back of a truck, and it wasn't going to fit, who budgets? Who pays the cost of altering the building that's at fault?
Well, if council has actually allowed the building to be built, council would in fact have to bear some cost.
However, I think there's another part of what you're arguing. If the building is an existing building there, they have existing use rights. If that building was replaced by another building of a greater extent, then the existing use rights would be removed. So if somebody was going to expand the building, it would be an interesting legal argument at that stage.
Or if someone had extended and not bothered to get consent.
Yeah. However, I think we're getting removed from the essence of what this item is. I'm happy to move recommendation 7. Councillor Gordon, you second it. Any further discussion? Put it to vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you.
Section 12, we've had a discussion around Taiaka Memorial Park. And although in section 12.1, I may not have been correct with the figure of 800,000, the recommendation stands despite the conversation we had this morning, which largely is that we have, you may recall Jenny Giblin from Giblin Group presenting to us. She has offered to provide us with support to get external funding for the amenities block, irrespective of where it's based, and for $12,000. That's unbudgeted in the annual plan, and so the recommendation here is that that we do go through that, but any money that we manage to bring in is offset by her fees.
Sorry, Monty, just because it talks about the new facilities, it doesn't contravene the discussions.
Yes. Yes, I tried to say that, so thank you for underlining it.
Questions first.
My concern would be around we're trying to apply for funding when we weren't certain of what that might look like. I wonder how successful that would be. I would prefer that we firmed up, this is what we want, and she goes and we ask her to do this.
So in other words, it would be an intent which gives the chief executive the authority to.
Okay.
So
Yes.
that's how I would see that. So.
Yeah, I agree. At the moment, of course, we're still going ahead with, unless that changes, but I'd be very cognizant of the potential change in direction and the suggestion from Mr. Duncan this morning or this afternoon that we could use Heritage New Zealand as funding. There are a number of mechanisms here that are only implement when there is surety in the solution.
Thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I had a question around this, Worship, around the fact that given that basically I wrote down is the necessity to engage the Giblin Group to find external funding a product of our skinny staff.
Look, I think the best way to deal with this is to put a motion on the table because you're actually debating the motion to some extent.
Right.
Look, I will move that the Giblin Group be engaged to secure external funding, etc. And in speaking to this, I'll partly answer your question. The reality is we don't have the manpower to be able to do this work or the person power, okay? Nor do we have the skill, nor do we have the connections. And we need to go and raise a heck of a lot of money for a number of projects. Certainly this is one way of dabbling our feet in the water. You know, if we get a net result greater than what we would likely to have achieved on our own stand, then it would give us some degree of confidence moving forward to other projects. But I've spoken now, look for other speakers to motion.
You need a second, you wish.
Sorry, thought I had one, but no, you
do.
don't. You do now.
Councillor Gordon.
Councillor Gordon, thank you very much. Other speakers? Councillor Dalby.
Just a point of clarification. So this money is going towards the 75% of the funding of this is going to be externally funded. So this money will be going towards that, and it won't. The local community are still going to have to raise some funds. Is that correct, or is none of that clear yet?
This would be seen as non-council money, which would be externally raised funds. So, for instance, in Bulls, we had externally raised funds, and then we split it up into national, local, etc. But it's all externally raised funds. It's not money that council contributes.
Thank you.
Yes.
In the annual plan budget that's been approved, we have 2 million that's been set aside or that has been earmarked for this work. Our target would be to achieve at least 10% of external funding to support that, which would be a positive income. And that's how we intend to use the Giblin Group to support that target.
So supplementary question, please. And is there an expectation of the Taihape community to do some local fundraising for this project?
Which is my expectation, certainly. Any further speakers to motion? Councillor Dunn.
Yes, I'd like to speak against this motion so that I can have my 2 cents worth. Because I see that, as you say, we have got a lot of big projects coming up. We are going to need to raise a lot of money. And if it's $12,000 every time we go to find external funds, why wouldn't we use those lots of $12,000 to fund another staff member for our council, given that that person would then have the skills, would come into the organisation and be one of us going forward for the Martin build and all the other builds.
Are you asking me a question?
Yes, I'm saying that I'm speaking against this, spending $12,000 in one point.
I would try that in writing. Any further speakers? Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, yeah, just a little bit of clarification. Oh, I am speaking for the motion. A little bit of clarification with new fund park facility being deducted from funds secured. So you're talking about the fund to engage the Giblin Group being deducted from the funds secured. So that would be deducted from the funds secured by the external funds secured by the Giblin Group. I would just think that would be quite strange that you could apply for external funding and have a funding fee deducted from that.
What I think council staff are saying is we don't have a budget for this, and therefore the expectation would be that money that is used to source someone would come out of the money that has been received.
I understand the question. Quite often, and I think if I recall correctly, when Jenny presented to us, I asked that very question, and she said it's it's not normal that funders will fund for her activity.
That's great.
So this is a kind of an accounting thing. We've got a budget of 2 million. We have a target of 200,000. If she secures 200,000, then the 12,000, you might say, comes out of 1.8 million that's left, if that makes sense. So I haven't worded it, I don't think. I perhaps could have worded it better.
Just subsequent, I'm really not happy with that wording at all.
I think the intent is there, but maybe correct. Any further speakers? Councillor Ash?
Wording aside, I'd like to speak for the motion, regardless of what happens in Taihape. I actually think that engaging the Giblin Group is a really, really good move, and the kind of cost involved that they're suggesting at 1.5% of the overall funds raised is absolutely minimal. I think it's tiny.
Councillor Belsham?
I'd like to make an amendment to the recommendation, and that would be to remove the water fee being deducted from the funds secured. So the intent's still there, it's just saying how that fund is being paid.
Seconding that.
I think everybody's in the same mind here. Would you like to move the amendment? You have done so.
I've just moved it. So
And with the second, are you happy, Councillor, if I put that to a vote? I'll put it straight to the vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. So we're back to what's the substantive motion now. Any further speakers? Councillor Dalgety, and come back to Councillor Belch and Councillor Dalgety.
I'm in favour of employing the Giblin Group to do this fundraising. From the point of view, I think it is a very specialised skill, and as she pointed out in her presentation to us, she has had a good success rate even in our area. Even if we were to employ someone within council, I think the skill that's required and the connections and networks that she offers wouldn't be the same.
Councillor Dalgety stole the words out of my mouth. So, ditto. Yeah, well said. Has a proven track record, and I don't think we could source that type of expertise as a staff member. So we'll be happy to support them.
Councillor Dunn?
With us just going through the balls and trying to raise funds for that, and it was quite difficult within house, I think. Going through the Giblin Group, I think, would be a good idea, because we do have wider networks than we do.
Unless there are other speakers, I'll go to right of reply. Pretty much Councillor Belson has said it, ditto. Effectively, we don't have the skills. Sourcing somebody with the connections and so on is next to impossible. The Giblin Group know that we have some very big projects in the future. It's of their interests to put a huge amount of effort in to try and get something here. Right, now I have right of reply. I'll put it to vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried, thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Section 14, the Hunter Hall bulletin. I'll go straight to recommendation.
Sorry, can I just go back? Yeah, you need to correct this. You've done it. Sorry, that's right. Yep. Carry on. Apologise.
Okay. So section 14 on page 109, $300. Mark, did you want to speak to this? Or?
I mean, it's a small sum. It's just a question that normally this would be done by the MOU partners, but there isn't no MOU partner. So just see logically that we use the same funding mechanism for district promotion.
Is this a question, Councillor?
No, just wanting to move it.
Right?
Makes absolute sense. Love the idea of being able to support Hunterville with a really strong wee group there and opportunities.
Councillor Lambert, would you like to second?
Yes, very much.
Okay. If you want to swap roles here.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Right.
Sorry, Jim.
Is there anybody wanting to speak against this or question it? Put it straight to vote. Those in favour?
No.
Those against? Carried. Thank you.
Turning back a page, I'm sorry, the section 13, refund of excess water charges. I'm comfortable that both the claims that are there are legitimate. We've got a recommendation. Recommendation 11 and 12.
I'll move so that it's on up for discussion. If I get a seconder. Councillor Ash, I think you had your hand up to second that. Do you wish to speak further to it? You said it. I agree. I think they're both legitimate concerns. And this is where we did the work. There was a technical fault on behalf of council, which is, these things happen, but it's incurred a cost on the ratepayer, therefore we should pay. Is there anybody wanting to speak against?
I've just got a question in regards to it. Is it normal practice for us to bring this to council? Because I thought this has been an operational process previously.
I can answer the question, just pause. I think this is for a full refund.
Correct.
Yeah. So my delegation is only for 50%.
Right.
And so I'm coming to you for full.
Okay. No, that's fine. That clarifies.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, a question for the chief executive here on this one, and fully support the intention of this and absolutely in favour of it, but it's a significant amount of money. So how long was this an issue, and when did it, I've just been flicking through the notes as to when it came to council's attention, because that is a standard water charge when you look at what the normal charges were. It's a significant amount of water going somewhere to get up to that. So how did we get to that process?
Because the pipe fitting that was incorrectly done was directly above a tile drain, therefore the water loss wasn't picked up.
Okay, so how long's the reading?
Reading good.
Okay. Water.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Move to section 18. Since I've written this report, there have now been 4 letters received by council in support of.
Can we just go back because we haven't passed
Vote
those.
on that.
I'm so sorry. Sorry.
It's usually me that makes that. So this, and it's also staff because that was effectively moving as a block 11, 12.
Yes.
Put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Section 18, renaming of Martin Park to Dick Hearn Park. We've received 4 letters of application. I think word is identical. Nonetheless, there are 4 people in the community that have requested the same thing. Very passionate, as you can have seen in the appendix.
Would somebody like to move? I thought it might be you, Councillor Belsham.
I would be more than happy to move that recommendation.
I'll second it. I've spoken to both parties. I know that you, or several parties, I know that you have as well. You wish to speak to it?
Well, yeah, just in backing up, you will have read through that letter of application that Mr. Hearn's credentials within this community, and I fully support the intention of the application, and I believe if we go through the right processes, the Martin community will support that as well. So it's certainly this person has left a huge legacy on Martin Rugby and the big wider district. So I look forward to seeing it go through the process and hopefully a favourable outcome.
Can I ask the question of the mover? As a suitable process, would you see a piece on our website or on the paper and engaging with the Martin Community Committee as correct response?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, you could add the website to have a potential ability for people to be notified about that?
It's just so that it gives some guidance to staff as to what would be accepted. Councillor Ash.
Sorry, just a question, noting Councillor Elsham's wording about community being notified. So does this mean this is going through, or is the community being consulted?
Not notified, consulted, sorry, but a poor piece of wording by myself.
Yeah, of an intent. So, right, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you.
That's all from me. Is there any questions to the rest of my report? Worship?
Councillor Carter.
One question regarding Popular Grove. With the resizing of this section, or the relaying of that road, does that mean that this section is gaining size? And are they going to be rated as such?
I think I can answer that one. So this is a potential subdivision as well. So the process would be both properties that are being subdivision, both of them would have to undergo a description and survey, and that would generate its own package, including rate position.
I think where the house is sitting on top of the road.
Oh, sorry, I was on the wrong way.
Yeah,
Yeah, no. Sorry, I was through that. I thought you were referring to the other
Yeah,
one.
I'm just wondering whether there's going to be any dispensation for them for that sort of thing, not to be penalised for the reshaping of this section.
If I go back onto the recommendation, take whatever action is reasonably required to remedy. I think your question is appropriate in terms of reasonableness, and that if I would expect that a reasonable solution would be to compensate should we take land from them.
And what if what if you're actually giving them land? Do they get penalised at a higher rate for their section that they always thought they had?
It's speculative at this point, but if their land property, if their value improved as a result, then we would rate accordingly, and that's not necessarily within my control.
That's it.
With that in mind, I mean, if they happen to gain a piece that they didn't realise they had, that rating will be starting from now, not back.
Correct.
Correct. It couldn't kick in until QV had done a revaluation.
Thank you.
And to be honest, I can't see it triggering QV's interest at all.
I think to Southern Water Councillors in particular, you would see my response that I've given verbally here. I will absolutely take the most reasonable approach for them, with an expectation to relieve any anxiety from them of the situation, which is not they're doing.
Thank you.
We're now moving on, and now we're into the top 11 projects. Or did we go to 11 and then drop one out again? Back down to 10.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think what I'll do, like we normally do every month, is I'll just go through them one by one, and if you've got any questions, you can ask at that time. So the first one on the list is the Mangaweka Bridge. So any questions on that? The second one is the Martin to Bulls wastewater centralisation project.
Yes, I have a question in that where do we sit with the wastewater group that was convened to be part of this discussion? So in my mind, we either have to say we've now reached a position where we know what we're going to do, therefore we don't need you, or we reach a position that says this is where we're up to, guys, this is to inform you. Which end of that spectrum are we at?
That's a good question. So what's happening at the moment is there's a lot of technical work happening in the background, and we don't really have anything to report until we get all that work back. So we can put the group back together, but we've got nothing to tell them at the moment. And that's I'm really happy to do that. I think it's a really good idea, and I appreciate the suggestion. I think we haven't met for a long time, and that's something I will pursue.
Yeah, I think maybe even a note to them. Right, thank you. That's the only question I had around that.
Thank you for that. The next one is the upgrade of the Ratna wastewater treatment plant. Any questions on that one? Number 4 is the Tutanui irrigation scheme.
There's a question on that. We've effectively received money from the PGF funds for this, and we have some obligations now, including reporting back to them. And there again was a group of people associated with us. So the question I have is, are we engaging back with them? And have we prepared a report that we're obliged to do back to the PGF?
Thank you for the question. So the first one is on the reporting. So I've communicated with them on the delay caused by COVID. So they're aware of that. We've agreed on a report that they would require by, let's say, middle of August. So that's all good. We are also working with them, with the Provincial Growth Fund and with MDC. They've got a project very similar, also funded, and we're going to align our efforts to make things a bit easier and a bit more streamlined. And that happens on the 18th of August.
That project being Vinegar Hill.
That's correct, yeah, that's correct. So all the reporting is in hand, and there's been lots of communications between myself and the PGU. Once again, the group has not been reconvened, and I take that on board again as a very good suggestion to be done.
Next one. I'm sorry, did you?
Sorry, when you,
beg
beg pardon, can I just clarify, when you say Vinegar Hill, is it Papakura? What's the Vinegar Hill?
It's the rework.
Yeah,
Rework water spec.
Pocket,
Yeah, got it.
but it's not coming out.
We are feel for you.
We know what you're saying.
But you're referring to the water scheme that's featured around rework, driven by Justin Bennell.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Right, so the next one, number 5, is the Bulls Multipurpose Community Centre. Any questions on that? Very good. Number 6 is the establishment of the new council administration centre and library in town. Any questions? There we go.
The one through the chair. So there's been no further progress on this pre-engagement strategy. When are we likely to see further progress?
I can answer that. There has been further progress. So I've approached someone to assist us with some engagement. They've put a proposal together for us. But what I intend to do now is bring something back to the next meeting and talk to you about entwining it with the long-term plan pre-engagement following our workshop last week. So do them simultaneously. And then again, if there's things in other parts of the district that we can combine, do the same thing. Yeah.
Right.
So you'll see something next month.
Thank you.
Number 7 is the Tai Happy Memorial Park development. Any further questions on that? Number 8 on the list is the Tai Happy Civic Centre. That's obviously a little bit further in the future, so there's no progress on that. Number 9 is the Martin Dam Spillway repair. Now, this is one that's been completed. And-
Sorry, can I just go back to the previous
Yeah.
one? Because I'd like to ask a question of possibly Councillor Duncan. So we've just had Mamma Mia. It's been sold out virtually for 9 nights.
Mhm.
How many people have been in the hall?
So the hall has a restriction of 250 people in it. So there are about 35 on stage, and there's another almost 15. So they could only have just under 260 people in the audience. And there were 9 performances. That includes 2 matinees, and they've all been sold out.
The reason I ask this is because as we go through this process, one of the fundamentals that if they want a town hall, which is probably going to happen, we have to have some feeling around the seating requirements. So the ability to seat sort of around 250 people would be.
Yes, can I? So the reason why there's only that amount of people is because of the exits. I believe it's a fire requirement. And in fact, there is an upstairs in the hall as well that could be used for seating. But it can't be because the seats aren't up to scratch and because of the exits once again. So, yeah, if that clarifies, it's actually got capacity to sit more like 500 people at the moment.
Councillor Dalgety.
Just like to comment there that they added on 3 extra nights or 4 extra shows. Obviously that's not easy to manage in terms of the actors and all those other things. And there's a lot of people in the community that would have loved to still be attending but can't because it's sold out.
Yeah, the only reason I'm asking is we need to build our knowledge as we go around capacity issues and so on. So it'd be interesting in that file to note that the hall was sold out for 9 nights. This sort of gives us a pattern of how many people use the facility. Thank you. Sorry to deviate.
Thanks for that. So number 9 is
sorry,
the.
we have a question, Councillor Sharp.
To do with that sort of thing, that capacity for North for preparation, etc. We've been in the supper room underneath, that's where they do, and that's quite a good size room.
Point noted. Yeah.
So number 9 is the Martin Dam Spillway repair. This project has been completed, and I would like to remove it off the list, if that's all right. And I propose to replace it with Puterino Landfill as a live project for us to keep an eye on a monthly basis. I think they would have more value. And
Questions, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Dalgety, Councillor Gordon.
So now that this project has been completed, where does that leave those reservoirs?
that is dependent on the Martin water strategy and what comes out of that work. So let's say 4 to 6 months down the line, once we've done all that work and we can present something back to council, we need to then make a decision on what the long-term use of those dams will be. If we'll use them as a water source, then we would need to spend substantially more money on those dams. And if we decide not to do that, then this is the permanent solution.
Supplementary.
Yeah.
So this patching that's been done is permanent for the foreseeable future. That's what I'm getting. It's not just a temporary thing that's going to last us 5 years or 2 years. It's as good as we can make it now.
So I'll answer that. It's as good as it's going to be for now, but we have to manage the water level down. As it stands, we can't have it at the first level.
Councillor Jarvie.
Inquiring around the water strategy that you're developing. So are you looking at the potential recreational use of those dams if they're not used for water? So the value add to the district, if you could put a ski on them, is that part of your brief?
It is not at the moment, but it is, that is an interesting thought. It's something potentially we can try and put in the mix. But it's not in there.
Thank you. A supplementary question, please.
So long as it's not extending the water skiing season.
With all the planting and the work that has gone around the dam currently, when will it be open for public to walk around, not work?
The planned opening date for the public is October this year.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on.
We'll move on. Number 10 on the list is the list of subdivisions in the region. And a bit of an update on them. We have only one new one. Sorry, I've got that wrong. We've got 2 of them. There's one on the Henderson's line that's been proposed. Very high level conceptual issues at the moment. And the other one is Brendan's line, where there is talk about an extension of another 30 sections on Brendan's line.
Yes. Through you, Your Worship, is there any update on the design of the corner at this stage?
No.
No timeline to work to?
I've been chasing that up, and I'm expecting a new timeline by end of the week.
Thank you.
Councillor Lambert, Councillor Dunn, Councillor Lambert.
I just on the Wanganui Road subdivision, like it says, district plan change will be required to allow zone change for land. Where are we actually with? Because I think we mentioned a few meetings ago, didn't we, about changing the zones? How far through the system are we with that?
We have not done that at all, so we've had no request for it. It's just sitting there.
There has been conversation between Johan's team and Mr. Simpson on what's required. I think we would naturally need to have a conversation about where that district plan change funding would come from. And I've met with Mr. Simpson to discuss that with him. So there has been preliminary meetings between Mr. Simpson and our consenting team.
Okay, Councillor Dunn, did you have a question?
Oh, it's just, these are all the subdivisions that are happening at the moment. There's one at Bowles in the corner of Bridge Street and Wilson, yeah. Is that, I don't see that on there.
No, I'll add that on.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that also the one on Bridge Street? Down these sections have been taken out and the intention to build them there. Down by the bomb shop.
We have not seen an application.
That isn't a subdivision consent, but it's purely a replacement of an existing building, isn't it?
Oh, it's taken out 3, I think I'm putting 6.
I think I tallied them up the other day. What was it, 700 odd at various stages of process? Which again one of the reasons why we've put off the excellence report. Our chief executive is going to be working nights. We're not keeping.
Thank you, Hugh. That's all from me.
Right, would somebody like to move that we receive the report, please? Thank you. Take your place. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried, thank you. That takes us to attachment 10, pages 164 through to 237. And would somebody preferably like to receive them as a block? Councillor Tira, Councillor Wilson, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Right. Then we're into recommendations. First one, the following recommendations from the Youth Committee. That the Rangitikei Youth Council recommend to Council that the Martin Lobby changes location to be close to the skate park, suggesting the former magnolia tree as an option to explore, because the current space is too small and the location isn't desirable for youth. I have a question around this. This has no budget or finance information attached to it at all. I wouldn't like to see us just saying it's a done deal without actually having that knowledge. Can you update us?
May I suggest that, as council, you suggest that staff investigate the option?
So we change recommend to recommend to investigate the option. I'm happy to move it on that basis. Is there a second to that? Councillor Ash seconding it. Questions or speakers to it? I don't know. Right, put the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Happy. First one, that Happy Community Board recommend to Council that a variation to the Happy Squash Club deed of lease be granted for an area of approximately 280 metres squared for the purpose of additional squash courts. This has been around. There have been reports that from memory don't indicate there's a problem to that. There's somebody got more knowledge than I have. Are you happy to move?
I'm actually going to ask a question of staff. Given that this is, that the current structure is more than a single story and it's built out of concrete block up sometime in the 60s, I think. Have we had any reports, indications of its earthquake status? Because I don't know whether the club has thought about it. They didn't say anything at the meeting. It would be awful for them to rush in and then find it. Oh, God, isn't up to it either.
I'm struggling to understand why you think it would trigger the earthquake prone building status.
Well, just that it's a two-story structure made out of concrete block may or may not be reinforced. I'm just asking a question. We're about to give them more land, which is fine. I don't have a problem with the land gift. It's really sitting on our council reserve. I just want to make sure we're being squeaky clean here.
Mr. Collis, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. We are currently busy with Thai Happy. I can't recall whether that one's specifically on our list or not. But we'll investigate.
Yeah. But if I may, Your Worship, I mean, it would make quite an impact on their funding and their funding applications if they were, if they had to do an upgrade, they'll be applying for upgrading plus building new as well. And it's something for them to think about. Big picture.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
I believe I might have some helpful information. They have spent, I believe, almost $100,000 on their facilities in the last couple of years. And as part of that, they have done a major upgrade, and I would suspect that we may find that some of that investigation has gone on as part of that.
If they've done that work, consents team must have looked at that the fact that they're compliant, because otherwise they would have been required to bring it up to code at the time.
Yeah, we'll look into it. We should bring it up.
That's the hero.
Oh, sorry, my question just taking on board what Councillor Gordon has just asked is the onus on the building on us as council to know that information, or the onus is on the potential people that are looking to.
The onus is on them.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Yeah, a question. I'm just not. I understand the intent of the motion, but again, I'm not happy that much with the words. It says that the Taibi Community Board recommend to council that a variation of Taibi Squash Club deed of lease be granted. So a little bit of clarity around the variation, I think, and we're just saying, well, we'll just grant this, be granted, and we've granted now, we've just granted it, but we really don't know what the variation are. There's some terms other than for a proximate area of 280. Is it in perpetuity? Is it for 100 years? Is it for $1 a year consideration of rent and on council land? I think it's a little bit vague.
Yeah, I wondered whether somebody would.
I'm sure the intentions are absolutely honourable in all ways, and I can see that it would be great for the Squash Club. But by agreeing to this as it is written, we are agreeing to a deed of lease to be granted to a variation that nobody at this table knows what the variation is. And that, to me, causes a little bit of concern as a group of governors on effectively a council bit of land.
Do staff wish to respond?
Do you know the lease that we have currently?
No, I don't know the term. I mean, what they're doing is simply saying the lease should be extended, but I can't tell you offhand how long the lease is for.
Or what the current terms are. So heck with the idea, but I'd like to see it be perhaps put aside to come back with a little bit more further information. I think would be the prudent thing to do.
The question then I have is, I wondered whether this might come up in terms of whether this would result in a timing issue in terms of construction. In other words, if that was likely, would you be happy if that was delegated or information emailed out?
Yeah, either or. I'd be also happy if it could be dealt with at next week's assets meeting.
Yeah.
And if it could be dealt with at next week's assets meeting, which the majority of council attend, I would also be happy that could be tidied up at that. So I'd be happy if it was referred to assets for some clarification.
So would you like to move in that direction?
Yes, I would. I'd like to move that that be, whatever the item is we're talking about, be referred to assets for clarification and or approval.
I'll second it.
Is anybody against that? I'll put it straight to the vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you.
Is that what you would seek?
And the next one. Back to toilets. Oh, yeah, spent a lot of time on toilets. That having regard for the options for toilet facilities at Mount Stewart Reserve, this is recommending the interim measure access to mobile service station be negotiated. Would somebody like to so move? Councillor Hero, Councillor Jordan, do you wish to speak to it? This has also been between the community board as well.
Yes.
Through you, Your Worship, it's pretty self-explanatory. It involves us having some form of lease rent agreement with the service station. It doesn't involve us buying any assets with the building.
Put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you.
Can you just change mobile to mobile?
What allows you to move from? If you've got it, you can't mobile. Must be near the end of the day. Martin Community Committee recommend to council that the name within the Hereford Heights subdivision as requested by the developers be named as follows. Stage 1, first cul-de-sac, Oldfield Lane. Stage 2, Bit Lane, and call it a Oldfield Street. If it doesn't meet council criteria, I don't see difficulty with it being council lane, frankly. Councillor Wilson.
So moved.
So moving. Second, Councillor Wilson. Any discussion?
Just to clarify, the developers brought this to the community committee meeting and were very happy for council to apply whether it be street or lane, provided it had Oldfield attached to it. So they were giving an open suggestion that whatever fitted best within the council criteria, with regard to the design, whether it became a street or a lane, they weren't concerned. So that was just to clarify that.
Do you wish to put into your motion that that it be a street or lane?
I don't know if it needs to be clarified by council. I don't know what constitutes, is there something
We
that
have both
constitutes a
of them.
street?
Recommendation versus line.
Okay. Put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carries. Thank you. Martin Community Committee recommends to council that based on the feedback from the business survey and discussion meeting, the committee that 6 symbols of the Martin signage exclude the shopping bag but include the shopping trolley, and believes the supermarket trolley is a universal symbol. So it would be an appropriate time also to consider the submission in the start of the meeting as to whether you see that's appropriate. The wheel, in effect, instead of a sheaf of barley. Is that the way that I should be dealing with this?
Could we move that recommendation first? No, but we're moving the recommendation on the bag first before we go into discussion.
It wouldn't be necessarily to adopt, but it would be a potential recommendation to correct. Right, we'll deal with this one first. So this is the shopping bag being replaced by the shopping trolley. Would somebody like to so move? Councillor Wilson, Councillor Dalgetty, do you wish to speak to it?
It was debated, yes I will, I wish it was debated in some detail at the Martin Community Committee. It was also noted that in the submissions and things that went round, for whatever reasons, the 2 supermarkets in town were unable to respond to those submissions, but it was generally accepted that, for example, if you're doing online shopping, you click and go to a cart, you don't click and go to a shopping bag. And so the general consensus was that a shopping trolley is generically a sign of shopping, and we did hear that earlier today. For example, I didn't know it was a shopping bag, and I thought it was a bell. But I don't go shopping, so I think sorry. I think there is a great deal of support for the shopping cart symbol being included in the signage.
Does anybody have a contrary view? Right. So you're moving that. As the second, they put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Next one, do you want to deal with in any shape or form the public forum you've had? Councillor Hero.
I've got a question around, I put on the changes that they want to make here, but I've got a question around what's become evident to me over the last, probably up to 9 months or so, because 10 months have been part of it, is the ever evolving thing that happens when, if we use the Taihape amenities block as an example of work that's done by one lot of councils and then shifting into a new set of councillors. So so we take that for an example. This issue around the signage is something that, I wasn't a councillor, but I sat in track. It was something I'd seen quite a few, like over 12 months ago. So my questions is around what, it's because it's a consistent thing, it seems to be a consistent theme for us where I thought that there was a whole lot of consultation that's happened. There's a whole lot of consultation even with the Taihepe communities. There was a whole lot of consultation, as I understood it, that was fed back to TREC around Martin, you know, around what the new signage was going to be looking like. There's a whole lot of consultation that happened to do with the Bulls Community Centre. So my question really is around what is the prudent way that we go through that in 2 months' time, if somebody else comes here, turns up, and in the next meeting says, well, nobody consulted me about whether it's going to be a hub wheel or whether it's going to be another, you know, something else that's happening at the Bulls Community Centre. To me, I don't know what it is. It's just that coming in this term, it just seems like everything is. There's no consistency. There's no real stand that we've had where we've been able to say this is what's happened. And is that just the nature of being the council? Is just the nature of it?
Yeah, the answer is I share your frustration, and that rests with you and your peers around this table. Purely and simply, that's democracy at work. And the reason we have elections is that somebody can go and stand in a community and say, I would like to be elected, and this is what I'm standing for. And it's absolutely their right to be able to stand and challenge what has gone before. No, there's no way that you can just bury the right of democracy here. But as I said, it rests with you and your peers around the table. Councillor Ash.
So speaking to the signage issue, and I share Councillor Hiro's frustration with what I'm hearing as well, that we think we've got everything in place and that we've consulted with various groups and we think we've come to a decision, and then another group comes in. I've got nothing against what was presented here today, but I do think going forward with that, we've gone through a process where we've consulted with Martin Community Committee, so we need to pull them into that conversation as well, because there does seem to be this communication between two different groups that maybe hasn't happened, that could have happened, to ensure that everybody's on the same page and working forward. I do think that we need to discuss it with the community committee.
Councillor Belcher.
Yeah, it was a surprise to me for this to be raised again, but in the explanation it was stated that there was some consultation with this group, and then for whatever reason that consultation has stopped and they've presumed that they've been listened to and obviously haven't. So I would ask that staff who are now in charge of the town signage project, so mainly not looking or forcing anything upon you, Nadia, but that you go back and speak with that group and try and incorporate a compromise between what's already been designed and possibly engaging and utilising the symbol that they have stated has been a symbol of Martin for quite some time. I mean, it certainly has been part of the Martin Township, and I'd be happy to be part of that as an elected member, be part of that discussion as well to support you.
There must be an incredible frustration to staff with this continually going back and revisiting decisions that council has effectively made or effectively community and council have made. So frustration and a workload for staff, but it's also a very significant cost. You know, so share your concern.
Can I just state that, I mean, it's unfortunate that there has been a change of staff that have been dealing with this project. So another staff member had to actually take over the reins, so to speak. So that's possibly where that continual consultation has maybe has halted. It's certainly no blame on anyone, but I think in fairness to the presentation today that we should actually go back to them and see if they're happy to compromise about what might be a favourable outcome. That would be, in my mind, a way forward.
Okay, we probably, what I'll ask councillors now to deal with is the specifics of this case rather than a wide, and I'm probably guilty of widening it out. So Councillor Duncan, is your question related to this one?
Yes, I'd just like to back up what Councillor Belsham has just said, because it did. I've heard very clearly from Ms. Rain this morning that there was a consultation period that was going on, and then it stopped. So it was, yeah. So my answer, yeah, I'd like to back that up.
Councillor Lambert.
Mine's not so much a question as a statement. I mean, obviously, the people of Martin would be expected to make a decision, but as a non-Martin resident, like it hasn't really got any natural features that puts its hands up to be the symbol of Martin, and Hub's something I've run with, and it's something I, as outside Martin, associate with. So, and further onto the time wasting that goes on, like you're almost better running with that and getting people on board, in my humble opinion.
Okay. Councillor Parker, welcome to the fray.
Just the question is, in terms of considerable cost, how many signs are we actually talking about with regard to Martin that we would need to change?
Okay, the considerable cost, the biggest single cost is in staff time and staff hours. Every time something gets revisited, I would hate to think how many hours are put to these things. But listen, we're not speaking to emotion. I'd prefer that we're actually speaking to emotion with regard to this. But in terms of just directly, so I'm not dodging a question, Martin has, is it 4 or 5 signs?
So there'll be 3 signs that will hold the emblem. Coming to you through the Policy Planning Committee will be a report that highlights what's happening with the brick frames that Lions hold, but none of these signs have yet been made. So we're not wasting money, if you like, on material.
Thank you. Wish to push for the motion on
Yes,
the table.
if I could move a recommendation that that staff tasked with negotiating or with consulting with Liz Rayner in regards with her presentation, and then bring back a design, a revamped design or a compromise design to the next policy and planning committee. If that next time. Oh, next week, sure. Maybe the next council meeting. Does that give enough time?
Hang on, can we welcome you to the table, please? And I'll pass it to staff to give us some advice. But it's, whoever does that, it's up to you.
I mean, I think we just firstly get the motion and you just pause for that. No pressure there, John.
Do you want to throw them at me, Councillor Belsham?
Staff are tasked with consulting with
staff
are tasked with consulting with Liz Rayner and the business community. Throw them out there. And bring back an updated design to the next council meeting. Yeah.
An updated design of the
Martin Township signage. Logo rather than the whole sign. It's only the logo we're talking about.
Can I also suggest that it's the Martin Community Committee rather than business, so you can change business to Martin.
You won't get it back to council next time. It will be the end of September.
The next council meeting, so it'll come back to full council.
Martin Committee in September.
Oh.
I'm sure we can.
Sorry,
Engagement.
I'm going to swap chairs with you in a minute.
So I think we should still take market community committee. It doesn't have to be in the formal, we can create a lunchtime meeting with them. Is it business community and marketing community or just?
Take out business community. I mean, Liz Rayner is representing the business community as far as her presentation to council today.
And after committee, and to bring back.
Is that working?
It's fine, staff, your worship.
Did we get a second to that? Councillor Wilson, Councillor Dalgetty, Councillor Ash, Councillor Dalgetty.
Oh, sorry.
I thought you
Scratch that one.
scratch that one. Mr. Dalgetty.
No, I was hoping to second that motion.
Should I add for a final decision to be made?
Pending further
I was still treating it.
Afterward meeting, or are we allowed to change that? Yeah,
I agree.
or a final decision. Afterward meeting.
Will be. I'm very happy with that.
Do we have to include, provided it's not a rainy day?
Yeah, and your worship, there's also been a suggestion from staff that we consult with iwi.
Yes.
Thank you. So I just need to check the council Dalton Wilson.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Going to put it to the vote.
Can I have a speaker against, please, Your Worship?
Yes, certainly.
I'm going to throw this spoken word because I think it has to be said. We seem to be getting stuck in listening to what I call squeaky wheelism. And if people don't win the first time, they come along like the dripping stone and have another go and another go, and then after the next election they have another go. And we actually forget where we've been. We spent most of last term dealing with this under probably one or two staff members, and they went through a huge process. And I'm backing up, your thoughts from before. And we just seem to forget where we've come from. And there's so many things, especially in the social space. I mean, if it's a sewage line, we don't seem to care less. We just get on with it, or a road. But if it's social stuff, we seem to want to have another go and another go. I'm going to vote against, just to signal our frustration.
Other speakers' motion. Councillor Dalgetty.
I'm in favour of the motion, Your Worship. I wonder if this is what causes us to question what is our engagement and what is effective engagement. And I think that is what's vital for us to do as a cooperative council.
So you're speaking in favour of the motion. Other speakers to the motion? Right of reply.
Yes, probably a right of reply and replying to Councillor Gordon. And it was clearly shown that there has been a breakdown in that consultation. And I believe it is up to us, the council, to actually put our hand up and say, yes, there has been some breakdown, and we will revisit that. I mean, that's democracy. I don't see that we should just put a line in the sand and say, I'm sorry, but we've already been out and no, we're not going to listen to you anymore. We've made a decision, let's move on. You'll find, and you are finding, the same things happening in Taihape, so it happens in every town in our district. And this is a way of acting democratically, and I believe we're making the right decision. So I'd ask that people support this motion.
So who will listen?
No, can I say something?
It's for this short.
I think to support Councillor Dalgetty from a staff perspective, the staff I've just spoken with agree with what you've said. I think if staff were opposed or didn't feel we were thorough enough, or felt that we were thorough, then we would advise you thus. But the fact that we're sitting here going, yep, we're not opposing the discussion, would indicate to me that we would accept a motion should that be carried.
Not sure, but yeah. We'll talk about that one later. Right, I'm going to put it to vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Right. Motion is carried. Thank you. That brings us to late items. We have one item agreed as a late that I've prepared to accept as a late item. Councillor Dunn, the ball is in your court. You need to detail first, in the first instance, exactly what you are asking for.
Can I just ask process for a little bit?
Certainly question the process at any time.
So I need to put a motion down first and then discuss it, or do I discuss it and then motion?
You really need to indicate where you are going. I think. Let me think on this one. No, I'll allow you a little bit of leeway to indicate presumably your concern first. All right? Is that what you'd like?
That would be great.
All right.
Thank you. This is, of course, regarding the Bulls Community Centre. As much as I've always supported it, I believe in it, the concept of a multi-purpose building and a one-stop shop for Bulls, I've always thought a great concept. I've been involved in this project for the last 7 years, and at times it's taken over my life. Because of this, I believe I know my community and their expectations on how the new Bulls Community Centre will be used regarding events that they hold now and into the future. To be all exclusive for all the community users, no matter the ability or age. In my view, I believe because of changes in design, the centre will need adequate alternative space for preparing and changing for events. It would be lovely, for instance, to hold something like Mamma Mia and Bulls with ease. So with that all in mind, I would like to put a motion to council, which is, I would like council to investigate with costings a changing room at the back of the new Bulls Community Centre, adjoining the backstage back door with a ramp access for changing and preparing for events. Well, hopefully you can read it.
Just wait till the motion's up on the floor before I call for a seconder, so everybody knows exactly what has been asked for.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, please, we are online. Looking for a seconder to the motion. Thank you, Councillor Carter, seconded. Now you can speak to the motion, which you've actually probably already done. That's why I was trying to get you to do it the other way around. Do you wish to add anything further before I open it up before for speakers?
I think you all know how I feel that I do feel strongly about that. To be able for our community to hold the events that they do now currently and hopefully into the future, I do believe, and this is my view, yes, that this events room, changing room is absolutely needed. For our schools, for all the events at the moment, the rooms that are being suggested because of the change of design, I don't think are adequate.
Can I just ask a question of you, Councillor? When would you require this to be done by?
As soon as possible. I'd like as soon as possible.
In other words, you're not saying that this prohibits the opening of the centre or anything like that?
I think if the investigation and the costings can be done before the opening, and then we can come back and decide on it, then at least the community can know that it will eventually come if that's the way the council decides.
Right. Because this is quite an important concept item, with council, I will waive the two speakers for and against, but I don't warn you that you get the right to speak once, and then there is a right to reply. Is that agreed? Right, which way round should we go? We had a second. Councillor Gordon, do you wish to speak?
Yes, I do. Look, I'm going to vote against the motion. I think we need to actually figure out how this building works. And I thought straight away of how Mama Mia is working in Taihape Town Hall. For those of you who don't know the building well, the effective change room is in the basement, or the old supper room, which is downstairs, and they go up a very narrow flight of stairs up to the ground floor, and then they do a hard right from there, and they go up another half flight to the stage area, which will be not unlike what is being proposed. I hope, and I'm pretty sure that the Bull Centre is going to have stairs wider than Taihape, because if I stick my elbows out, I rub them on both sides in Taihape, and yet it seems to be working, although I haven't worked backstage. I'd like to see this building up and going, and if we have to troubleshoot it and deal with some bugs, then we deal with them when they occur.
Councillor Ash.
Oh, can't wait.
So are you saying you don't want to speak?
Not at this stage.
Councillor Parker.
Yes, so in principle, I would like to support my fellow Southern councillors and the intention to meet the needs of the community that they live in. Although being in Ratana a bit distant from Bulls, I still feel that Bulls plays an important role, being the gateway to the Rangitikei from Palmerston North and Wellington. And so therefore the perception of the building is as important as the usage. The question I have is whether or not it's pretty much the same thing that the Mayor, His Worship the Mayor has said, is whether the changes that are required need to be done immediately or can wait until after the opening, and we can reassess as the building is being put to use of the needs of having those extra, because it's not just one thing that we're being asked to reconsider in terms of the design, but they can wait after the sign-off with the various parties that are involved in the building of the facility now. But in principle, I agree that there are concerns that need to be addressed that will give the Bulls, the immediate Bulls community, a feeling that this building meets their needs.
Councillor Dalgety.
Thank you, councillor, for your huge efforts around the subject, which I know is dear to your heart. And I respect your connection with the community and what you're putting through to us. But similarly to councillor here, I would like to see this building used and some sort of process that it can be reviewed at some stage in the future, whether that's 6 monthly, and this again addressed sometime in the future if it's not operating to community expectation.
Councillor Carr.
I support the motion, as you see. With the extension of the new room, enables more people to work a different area. As pointed out by Steve regarding the multi-purpose building, there's different areas that can be used at different times. If you're doing production or anything of that nature, you've got people assembling all over the place and having to get to the stage either coming through the audience or going outside and around or by other means, which make the whole process dysfunctional. So to have it being started or be looked into, and as to whether it could be made prior to opening or close to it, at least it would show the community that there is some effort being made to make the facility work better.
Councillor Lima.
I agree with Councillor Gordon. I'd rather see the building up and running and maybe revisited at a later date should the need require, once it's been used a couple of times, exactly if there is any alterations needed that would become more clearer. And yeah, I'll be voting against it.
Councillor Herright.
I'd like to support that. I support that motion. The council investigate the costings of changing room at the back of the new Boards Community Centre, joining onto the back door of the stage, with ramp access for changing pre-rented events. I don't see that there's a taking the next step over. That's complete. That, in my head, that's another step in the process. But for me, I've got no issue with that. With an investigation being made with that, I don't see that needs to impact on whether the building is open or closed. Because that's not what that's asking. So I agree with that. I don't see any issue with it. And I actually agree with it. It's in a rock and a hard place. But actually, what that is asking, I don't think that's unreasonable.
Councillor Belsham.
I've got a question first of all in regards with that the council investigates with costings. So with costings, is that specifying a funding element within that costings area? So that's what I'm interested in, and so I need that clarified whether that motion would cover that off. So
we can't do any of that work without involving some degree of cost.
So you can't.
You can't just use a square metre lump sum and say this is so many square metres. The rule of thumb would be this would be the cost in my view, but maybe staff would like to comment further on that.
No. So my question is based around how is this going to be funded? If, once we've got a costing, so does that motion actually state how we're going to fund it? Will that give us? Will the investigation give us that answer?
Yeah, I understand the question, and the answer would be it's unbudgeted.
So my concern is that this will put even more time impacts on our staff to provide this information with such a short time span between now and opening. So I'll be voting against the motion because of that. I'm quite happy to see the building in use and actually see if there are major implications once the building's in use. I think we're possibly trying to find an issue that may step up the
Councillor Wilson.
I think if we're purely and simply speaking to the motion there that sits up there, it says that the council investigates costings to add a room on the back of it. And sitting here as chair of assets, I'm very, very mindful of the fact that we're very under-resourced as a council in that area. And I'm very mindful of the workload that falls upon our principal advisor of infrastructure. But I can't help but thinking in the back of my mind, we're not asking for this thing to be built. We are simply asking for an investigation into costings. And if the investigation into costings in the simplest form with regards to staff time is well, X, Y, Z equals this in the building industry with regards to X amount of square meters to build a building of that nature, then I don't actually see that that's too hard to come back with, because we're not suggesting in any way, such way, manner or form that this is going to be built prior to an opening. And I don't think anybody can realistically even consider that. But I think it does, in that motion, answer the question that Councillor Dunn has posed, and a significant amount of work from herself in speaking with the community that she represents. So I actually don't have an issue with the actual wording and or the motion. So I will be speaking in favour.
I'm the last speaker before we go back to right of reply. I'm not going to be supporting the motion. Oh, sorry. You said you were going at 5 o'clock.
Yes, but I'm staying because I think this has been.
Right. Sorry, Councillor Duncan. When I saw you walk out, I thought I was gone.
I'm gone. Invisible. I will be speaking in favour of this motion, and I would also like to, as a point of clarification, say that I am a very experienced thespian. I have worked on stages all over the country. I have been stage manager and I have been full on stage. And I would like to say that this building is not fit for purpose. And you will find that there is no problem with this building because people will not use it. They will simply look at that space and say, we can't put anything on there. We're not going to book it. We're not even going to bother with that. We're just going to go elsewhere. So if you think that the problem is going to become visible, it's not, because everyone's going to go away and they're going to be very disappointed. And the reason why this is really important is to signal to our community that we are taking their concerns seriously. And when we stand up on that stage and open the building, we will signal that we are taking their concerns seriously. So I think this costings, this investigation is really important.
Can I ask a question? Have you actually been into the building?
Yes. And it was my first question to one of the people who was standing there. Where is the changing room?
Right. I get the last.
Clarification, we were invited to go on
Just earlier in the meeting, some of the councillors said that they hadn't been into the building. That's just why I was seeking a clarification. I'm not going to support the motion on the basis that I'm not convinced that there is an issue. I've spent quite a lot of time in the building. There are multiple ways of entering the stage area. My view is that the building design was consulted on with a number of ways in which the stage area could be entered. And I'd like to see the building operating and then make a decision around whether we spend further money around what may or may not be an issue. Because whereas the motion says investigate the costings, if you're going to do that correctly, it actually does involve money being spent. You have an architecturally designed building, and I'm sorry, you can't just say we're going to slap up something on the back of it. We'd really need to go back to the architects or some other architect and say, this is what's required. Write a reply.
Thank you. I think Councillor Duncan is right, and this is my absolute fear, is that the users would come in, look at it, say thank you, but no thank you. And the expectation of this being built for purpose, future-proofed building will come back and hit us. So that's all I'm going to say. And as I said, I know these, I've been involved with many of these events, and I know how to run over the years. So thank you. And
Right, and sorry, you wish to make a question?
Yeah.
Question there.
In order to make the motion workable for staff, what we've heard today, Your Worship, and to everyone, is a number of problems or potential issues with the staging area and access to it for various groups. And we've had issues for disabled access. We've had issues for school children in large groups. We've had issues of width of access for large costumes, etc. And what the motion does is design a solution which is effectively plonk something out the back. But that's not addressing the problem. That's our layperson's design to a problem. And my preference would be if elected members were to consider a motion, it would be to address the problem, which is an appropriate changing room, I suggest, a changing room appropriate to the thespian community and schools and disability groups and World of Rural Arts and whatever else is considered. Because it could be, for example, we excavate under the existing area. It could be, there are a number of solutions that might not be this, but actually meet the problem that's been defined. And I'd urge the motion to look more into how we might address the problem rather than this is a solution, please cost it. Okay.
Right. Excuse me, please. Actually, no, yeah. Right, we've had a right of reply. I will now put to the vote. So those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry.
Did you have your hand up before or against that?
For.
Can you try it again, please?
Yeah, please. We need to get this absolutely right.
Question one. Given the comments that the chief executive has made, do we need to do this before amendment, or do we need to?
No, I have to put it to vote. Those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands high so I can see them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The motion is carried. Thank you very much. Are there any further late items? Right. All the public side of the meeting to an end. And we'll just take a 5-minute break before we go into public excluded.